Bassmaster made a big announcement of no entry fees on the Bassmaster Elite Series. No entry fees? No problem. Well, that all depends who you talk to. And this week, we talked to two different Elite Series pros and somebody from B.A.S.S. We are joined by Greg Hackney, Lee Livesay, and Davey Hite. This week on...
I'm Bob Cobb from the Bassmaster. Welcome to Mercer.
Welcome one, welcome all, friends, family, freeloaders, fishing freaks, and of course, my humpers. Welcome into the Awkwardly Honest Fishing Podcast that goes by my last name, which is Mercer. Happy hump day to all of you, and thank you for once again joining me here on this podcast. My hat looks crooked. It looks different. All right, I think, whatever. It's going to be what it's going to be. This is a show that, I'll be honest, I contemplated not doing. Because I know the topic that we're going to talk about in this show, there's a certain percentage of people that are going to point their finger at me and say, well, he works for B.A.S.S, so whatever he says is bought and paid for. And guess what? You're right. I do work for B.A.S.S. But I think I've proved over the years that I'd be a lot more successful if my opinion was bought and paid for. My dad used to tell me growing up, you need to learn to put your brain in gear before you put your mouth in drive. And that is a talent that I have not mastered. But yeah, to state the obvious, I do work for B.A.S.S. But I love B.A.S.S long before I ever worked for B.A.S.S. That's what makes this job that I have a dream job. And part of loving B.A.S.S isn't just loving the company, it's loving the anglers, it's loving the families, it's loving everything connected with bass fishing. And one of my beefs that you guys have heard me talk about is just how routinely this, not just bass, but this industry is getting firebombed by people online just complaining about everything. And some stuff needs to be talked about. But the incessant finger pointing and just, if you want it to get better, this ain't going to make it happen. I mean, when you think about it, I mean, if you're an executive, let's just say you're Joe from Gillette, who's got a bunch of money and you think fishing industry is a great place to invest it. It's one of those big companies that we all want, right? Well, if you look up tournament fishing right now, the first things that come to the forefront is some dude who shoved weights in a walleye and a bunch of arguing. And Joe from Gillette goes, I'm going to go to pickleball. That hasn't always been the case with our sport. So this is going to try be an open conversation. And I'm not going to try and insert my opinion on things. Because to be honest, I didn't pay to sit at that table. I work for B.A.S.S. The anglers paid to sit at that table. B.A.S.S pays to sit at that table. I am an employee. But I also learned a long time ago, you learn a lot more with your ears than you do with your mouth. So what I'm going to try and do this week is have 3 different guests on here, all to address the big topic of no entry fees. 2 of them anglers and 1 of them a Bassmaster employee. I'm going to have Greg Hackney on, who is very positive about this. I'm going to have Lee Livesay on. Not as positive. Positive about the move. Not as positive about the payback. And I'm going to have Davey Hite on, who was part of the team that put all this together. And I'm going to try give them their opportunity to explain what they think is happening. Because if you go online, you get a lot of opinions from a lot of people. Some of them have vested interests in other leagues and other things. I mean, it totally makes sense for them to firebomb it. But bottom line, I think what B.A.S.S tried to do, they thought what they were doing is for the better. And it just may be. But you've got a group of anglers who feel like it's not better for me. And it isn't better for everybody. B.A.S.S will be the first one to tell you that they feel it benefits a lot of the anglers, but it doesn't benefit everybody. And one of the things that I love about the sport is the people, the families, the reason that I love the sport, the reason that this show exists. You think of all the episodes that you guys have enjoyed. It's the story, it's the risk that the anglers take and how they do something that just isn't normal, that isn't what everybody does. But I think that's true for all fronts. It's just passion. It's love. There's so many different ways anybody working in this industry could have gone. And your family, your friends have told you about that. You'd make more money if you just do this, but it's not bass fishing. Bass fishing's what we love. And that's what I think you see happening here is passion. Passion from all fronts. Passion to make it better, passion to wish it was better. And if one thing has happened in this decision, in this announcement, is I think it's brought anglers together. I mean, we were very divided over forward-facing sonar and a bunch of things. But the anglers are coming together. They're forming a group. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that is needed. Because clearly, there was a meeting in New York where 103, 104 anglers showed up, and some of them shouted from the rafters, but there was a lot of opinions coming in a lot of different directions. If you have a group, at least that's curtailed. At least the anglers can say, this is what we'd like to have changed. This is what we'd like to have better. And it just works out better for everybody. But again, I almost didn't do this show because I know some of you are going to say that. But if I didn't do this show, for those of you who say, well, why are you doing it? If I didn't do this show, there's another group of people that would gladly say, well, he's not talking about it, so there's something up. I don't think there's something up. I just think that it's got to work for more people. And hopefully this show will give you a pretty good outlook on real facts, real conversation from the people who bought a seat at that table. Not from somebody who's burning it down to get clicks. Speaking of clicks, though, every fishing thing is funded by sponsors. And I don't do this often, but I do want to do this because this is a product that, I mean, I live in Canada. I fish in the cold all the time. One of the worst things in the world is getting a set of gloves that does what it says it's going to do. It's waterproof, it's warm, it's flexible. You can touch your screen. I have bought hundreds of them and they all fail in some way. You know, they're comfortable, but guess what? I can't touch my screen. Or they're comfortable, but guess what? They're not really waterproof. These AFCO breakwater gloves are incredible. I know it's weird to see a guy this excited about a set of gloves, but I'm telling you, I have heard the stories about gloves for years. These answer every question. They're totally submersible. They've got a membrane in them so I can release a fish. I can touch the water. I'm not going to freeze. They allow me to touch the screen. AFCO breakwater. You want a set? Guess what? You're not all getting it. It's not the Oprah Winfrey show. But one of you is getting a set of not Yamaha, but they're a great outboard. I've been with them for over 30 years. AFCO breakwater gloves. All you got to do is put AFCO breakwater gloves in your comment. Whatever you comment, you can just be AFCO breakwater gloves. In the comment on YouTube, if you're listening on a streaming service, come on over here to YouTube and leave a comment. Before next week's show, we will draw and we will send a set of these gloves to our lucky winner. Now back to the serious stuff. We're going to kick this show off with it. I think this is the first time, definitely first time we've ever done this, a back-to-back guest. But it's because as soon as this podcast came out and the news came out, I mean, which is another funny story because I was ready. I told you guys I was going to go swimming with the fishes again. Well, I'm sausage my ass into a wetsuit. I'm about to get in the water. My phone blows up. Anglers want to talk about this big announcement. No entry fees. Then my phone blew up even more when anglers wanted to talk about the payback. ultimately I just turned my phone off and got in the water and shot some incredible footage. But what I'm going to try to do here this week is just listen to people from different points. And when last week's show aired, Greg Hackney did a great job. Everybody loves the Hack Attack. But we texted back and forth, and Hackney's like, man, I wish we knew about that news for the show. There's so much I would have loved to say. And I said, well, guess what? We're going to give you the opportunity. And with that, our very first guest, Greg Hackney. We've had a few repeat guests over the time, but I think you may be making history, the first guest, repeat guest on back-to-back weeks. Greg Hackney, where are you right now?
So I'm in the Illinois field office actually this week, hanging out with the Rather Outdoor bunch, and we're just working on some new product for 2025.
Nice, nice. Are you when you're working on product, fishing product?
No, as you can notice there, maybe working on a little deer hunting this week, and we find that this is the best place to solve the world's problems.
Oh, perfect timing for this particular topic. Big announcement happened last week. Actually, it happened last Wednesday when our podcast came out. Unbeknownst to ourselves, we could have talked about a lot. What do you think of the big doings?
Honestly, Dave, I think it's great. I think that the sport has needed this for a long time, and I think it will elevate our sport into, honestly, in a class with all the other professional sports. The majority of all professional sports, they don't pay to play, and so it's just awesome that. And I honestly couldn't be a better time for Bass to do this, just the way the things are going in our world. I just feel like it's perfect timing. A lot of young guys, new guys getting into sport. Um, you know, Fishing in a way had turned into, honestly, a rich man sport. I mean, you had to pay to play, and you had to pay a lot. And I just felt like it was getting to the point where, maybe there were guys out there that, their ability wise, they could do it, but they couldn't afford to do it. Couldn't afford to give it a chance to put it all on the line. And this basically opens it up for everyone from any walk of life. It's basically, it doesn't matter where you live, where you grew up. I mean, it's just making it for everybody. Everybody has a chance. I'll tell you a quick story about my start. I actually qualified for the elites 2 times before I actually signed up. And the reason was money, because I was afraid I couldn't afford it. And so I won the points in the Centrals in 2002. I won the points in the Southerns in 2003. I turned down both of those invitations to come to the tour level because of money. And so, funny story, in 2003, they had an open championship. It was for the opens. And they paid, if you finished in the top 5, they paid your entry fees into Bassmaster, into the tour level. And so I waited. I finished 3rd in that open championship and got my entry fees paid. In 2004, I fished on Bass's money. Basically, what we're going to do now in 2025. I mean, it was perfect timing. It allowed me and it gave me a chance to be here and sitting and talking with you, honestly. Because had they not done that, I probably would have completely turned that invitation down. And so I'm like, it opened the door for me and for us to be here. I mean, for me to be in deer camp with this group that I'm with right now, deer hunting, is all because of that opportunity. And so I think now, with we not paying any entries in 2025 and beyond, that's going to open the doors for a lot of people and just give everybody a legit shot to make a run at it. And the deal is, fishing has always been performance based. I mean, if you do well, you survive, and if you don't, and basically that will continue on. But the deal is, it won't sting as bad when you have a bad year.
Yeah.
Because you starting at zero. Basically you don't have any. You're not having to basically mortgage your house and everything else to become a professional bass fisherman. So I I'm not saying it's perfect. There's some issues, guys are having or whatever, but all in all, day in and day out, you can't beat this opportunity that we have next year in 2025.
Does it shock you to? I mean, I believe I can say this. You're an outlier when it comes to your opinion about it. I mean, there's quite vocally, there's been a bunch of people who, like, I think everything you just said is probably what Bass expected to hear. That is not what they're hearing.
A lot of that I don't understand. People these days in today's time, they just seem like they like to be mad about something. And so, regardless of whatever you do, somebody's going to be mad about it. But I think over time, when they really sit back and look at this opportunity, I'm like, this is a great opportunity. This is one that it might take a little financial savvy in the deal. And again, because I've been around a long time, so I've seen a lot of things. I've also, in my 20 years at Bass, paid right at $1 million in entry fees. Okay.
Wow.
Did the numbers while everybody was figuring all the other numbers, I was figuring those numbers. So I went back and thought about it, and I was like, I wonder how much money I've spent, to be a professional bass fisherman. So it's like roughly between the open events I fished and the elites, like $950,000 that I paid in my career at Bass. So I guess that may be one of the reasons that I open this opportunity. Like I have open arms. I mean, and again, I think when these guys really, when time and everything settles in and you don't have that knee jerk reaction and you really have time to soak this in, they will see such a positive this is in our sport. Davey Hite and I talked about it, that this is what guys have talked about his entire career. And I mean, Davey basically been around since Bass started. So, so guys have always wanted this. So why, a select group of people would fight it now, and it doesn't matter. Bass made the right decision. And again, I support them every way because I'm like, this is better for me and my family. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, yeah, that's the truth. One of the big things that has been thrown about with a no entry fee is it sustainable? And I don't think there's a question it's sustainable for Bass because it has been. I mean, really, they've been putting in that basically that amount or within a few $100,000 of that amount for the last 5 years. So I think that's sustainable. There's anglers that question if it's sustainable on an angler front because a 40th place finish doesn't get you that $10,000 anymore. Now you're getting $500.
Yeah, but what you have to figure is, Dave, in this deal, this is the way people have to look at it. So basically, every tournament that you show up to now, you made $5,000. You got $5,000 to start the event with. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So basically, when you win 500, you won 5,500. Like, you have to look at that in the right direction. I'm like, my deal is I've got an extra $45,000 to start with when we start our season. And again, it's performance based. The only people that ever make money in bass tournaments are the ones who finish at the top. I mean, it's always been that way. It's like that in every sport. The guys who perform at the top level are the ones who get paid. This is not any different. We're still fishing for $100,000. So think about this. So we were spending $5,000 an event to fish for $100,000, and now I can show up and fish for $100,000, and it doesn't cost me anything. So when you won an event before, you basically could take 45,000 out of it, so you only actually made 55,000. Now, when a guy there'll be 9 winners next year, and when one of those guys wins, he wins $100,000, not 55, 100. You have to do your math that way. Like, that's what makes somebody a good business person is you got to look at all your expenses. So basically, in the past, to fish the elites, it's somewhere right around $60,000 to $70,000 in expenses between the entry fees and just the cost of travel. Because most all guys, they room together, they try to cut as most corners as possible, gas, food, that type of deal. So you were somewhere between 65 and 70,000 at best on total expenses to fish the elites. And so now basically you're starting off at zero. So a guy like that last year made that won $80,000. Well, he made 10.
Yeah.
You know, though you got to look at the bottom dollar. It's all about the net and not about the gross. And again, I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it. Kind of like Chappelle said, I'm just gonna hang out for another year and see what happens.
We always have time for a Chappelle quote. Do you think this will change the way people fish in the way that it's gotten? I mean, with $10,000 for 50th place, I mean, nobody's going to be fishing for 50th anymore, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on how you look at it.
Well, again, when you say $10,000, it was only 5.
Yeah.
You were only 5,000. Yeah, it's never been 10,000 because you have to figure those entry fees out of it. That's the part that everybody seems to miss. I'm like, well, maybe I was the only person paying entry fees. I don't know. Like I never could. I'm like, I figure my money that way. So realistically, before, if you drew a check, by the time you hold out your expenses, hold out your entry fees, at best you make $2,500 for the week. That's it. And so again, it goes back to the guys who made money. You got to finish in the top. You got to finish in the top 25. You got to finish in the top 10. Like those are the events where I always felt like I was able to put money back. It's when you finish in the top 10. And now I'll be able to put even more of it back. So again, it's performance based. It's you got to perform high at a high level. I mean, that's the way it is. But the good thing about it is you won't break the bank when the year's over with if you were not able to finish at perform at a high level. And I think that's the big deal for me is that it maybe even give you a chance to like go for broke more, or not necessarily broke, but like if you had big fish 60 miles away, but you had check fish, 15 miles away, now you'll go ahead and make that run. We'll see guys do that, perform at a high level and take chances. And, again, this is an adrenaline rush. We're adrenaline junkies. That's why we do it. And so I think you'll just be able to see guys like take more chances now and fish for that $100,000 because that's what it's all about. Everybody wants a blue trophy. Like nobody remembers other than, the guy who was finished first. It's all about the blue trophies.
Well, you've got a few of those on your mantle, and I predict a few more in the future. I know you're part of a big, let's call it social hour right now, where you're hanging out. I don't want to pull you away from social hour too much longer because I know that's a social group.
With a couple Hall of Famers this week. So one Kevin Van Dam and one Mark Zona. They both have on their blue coats tonight at dinner. They wear them every opportunity they get.
So obnoxious. Thanks, Greg.
All right, we'll see you, Dave.
See you, buddy. Lee Livesay, always good to talk to you. Not that it's irregular. We do discuss things quite regularly. But this big announcement by B.A.S. Where are you at with no entry fees?
Man, a lot of stuff happening right now. It's crazy. I actually just saw that Clark Wendlandt retired and retired. No MPFL, no opens, no nothing. It sounds like. So congrats, Clark, on a great career. First of all, that's awesome. Love Clark to death. But no entries, man. The right direction. We're going the right direction. That's what we want, what we've needed. Definitely the correct direction we need to go. It's not rocket science when you look at the payouts now that's not feasible to make a living on the bottom end of that. Pretty much anything past what I haven't even looked at it that much, 15th, 20th. So there's some work to be done, as anglers and bass too. We're going to figure something out for sure, but definitely the right step, the right direction. Man, that's what us anglers have been asking for forever, is no entry fees. B.A.S. Brought that to us. Thank you, B.A.S. and Chase and everybody involved with that. That's definitely the right step. Now we've got to work on the next step, which is, adding to that payout to make it a feasible living for a rookie coming in with no sponsors, or a seasoned veteran that's got all the sponsors. Whether you're in first place or last place, we need to make it work. So definitely the right direction. Excited about it. It's easy to look at the payouts, myself included. I'm not gonna act like I wasn't. I was pissed when I saw the payouts, but that's what we've been doing. We're professional gamblers on ourselves, and that was our money, and we need to get where we're not having to gamble on our own money. So definitely positive for my household, for your household, for the sport of bass fishing, for Bassmaster and everybody, for the no entry fees. I think there'll be a lot of work in the next 2 to 3 months before the season, and we're going to work something out with Bass, with sponsors, with anglers, and figure out how to make this a little bit better than it is.
How do you make it better?
I'm not sure. There's a lot of talk going on right now with us anglers. We just got an email today, actually. Lisa just texted us with a survey from Bass on a few other options. So that's all just getting started. I've had meetings with companies, with anglers, with people a lot smarter than me, of course, over the last week or two, and I know a lot of other anglers have too. So I think the sky's the limit. There's a lot of other options and avenues to make money in this sport, and we need to get it in those payouts where it's guaranteed. Whether it's us helping Bass get another sponsor, whether it's obviously there's talk of side pots, but that's not what we want in the long run. That's just going back to where we just came from. So I'm not sure yet. There's a lot of talk and a lot of possibilities. I think Bass is willing to work with us. They obviously are. They just sent us some options of some things to look at, and it's just all starting. This just all happened in the last week, so it takes time. So I'm not here to answer that question correctly, because I would lie to you if I knew the answer to that question.
Are you shocked at the kind of outcry?
No,
when the announcement came out, it was like people were positive for like
10 seconds.
Maybe.
No, because I was the same way. I was actually filming with Ben and some 6 Sense guys down in South Texas that day, and Caleb had called me. I had my phone, just on a vibration, and my phone went off like 6 times in a row, and I was like, who the hell is that? And I looked at Caleb. I was like, dude, quit calling me. I'm filming. He was like, dude, you go look at this. You got to look at this. And I looked at it, and I was like, hell yeah, no entry fees. Hell yeah. Click, hung up, went back to filming, and like literally 5 minutes later, my phone was just bzz, 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 bzz. It was Caleb again, and I answered. He was like, oh, hold on. You got to look at the payouts. And I was like, oh, that's not good. So I looked at it, and obviously I was mad at first. We all were, just if you go from one end to the other, even though you're saving $45,000, it just kind of flipped it where the guys on the bottom end of the spectrum aren't losing as much, and the guys on the top end aren't making as much, is what it is. It's kind of that, which way do you want to go? Do you want to be an alpha? And, I don't want to fish for 70th place, my whole career. And you don't either. John Cruz doesn't, Polinick doesn't, so the numbers look good on the bottom and bad on the top. So it's just, it took me it took us all a couple of days to just kind of relax, because it's our livelihood. It's our money that we're fishing for. It's our money that we're putting up before this. So I think I was one of those people that was pissed for a minute. I didn't say anything because I wasn't really sure. I hadn't got to run the numbers yet. And obviously a lot of people ran a lot of graphs for us and numbers, and there's a million things you can look at. You can look at Major League Fishing's payout, and it looks great, but those guys are paying, I think, $6,500 entries for 7 events, and they have 2 great Red Crest and heavy hitters too that pay out really good too. But no entry fees is the future that we want. We just need to get where we can logistically make a good living, finishing in the top 50 against 100 of the best anglers in the world, and we can make it run. It doesn't have to be exactly how it was before, but it's got to get close. And I think we can get there somehow with a few different ideas and things. But no, I was definitely one of those people that was pissed at first because, everybody did their graph where you compared it last year and I was one of those guys that lost like 25 grand if it was no entries. So that's a lot of money, but it's nice to show up and not pay 45,000 in entries too, whether it's me or you or a rookie coming in with no sponsors or, somebody like Ike Ellie that has a bunch of sponsors, so it's still fresh, but I've slowly, said, okay, let's chill out. And obviously us anglers are all talking and trying to figure stuff out and talking to Bass and Bass is talking to us now. So I think there's stuff to figure out where we can keep it with no entries and make the payout a little bit better somehow, moving money around from somewhere. We'll figure something out. We still got plenty of time.
Do you think the majority of anglers just assumed when they read that the payback wasn't going to change at all?
Yeah, because that's what I did, right?
Which would be wonderful.
Right. No, I mean, obviously, you don't even think that, when you see it, you just say, heck yeah, no entries. And you look at that, oh, wow, you're not even thinking. And then you go, oh, yeah, that's our 45,000 a piece for 9 events is out of there. It's a lot of money. So, it's easy. Like my first thing was like, let's just all put in like $2,000, $2,500, $1,500, and there was all these graphs and we did that for a couple of days and it made the payouts look better. And then at the end of the day, as we all started, meshing our ideas, we're like, you know what, this is what we want. We want no entries, we want no entries. We've got to figure out how to make it work without putting our money back into it. That's the fight that we just won. So, like I said, there's a lot of people a lot smarter than me, with a lot better ideas than mine that are figuring stuff out for us for Bass. And, they're going to work for us. They're already putting in more money than they have in the past. It's not like they're taking money out. There's definitely a few questions, don't get me wrong, on our end for Bass. But I think we can figure it out and I think it's going to be good. It's the right step and, slowly next year, get a little bit more in there. The next year, get a little bit more in there and eventually figure it out, whether it's, how we've been doing or salary based or, there's a million different variables that you can look at into the future on no entry fees and what's feasible with live television nowadays.
Do you think the majority of anglers have followed the path that you have? Because I'll be totally honest, setting up this podcast, I assumed you would be more against it. And I'm probably going to get railed because Hackney was on here and he loves it. And your first words were like, oh, thank you. It's good. Do you think this is an involvement that has happened amongst the anglers or do you think there's still a lot of anglers that are pissed?
No, I'm not. No entry fees is what we need. And that's what I want, but the payout, no, I'm against what that payout is, And Hackney did surprise me on that. I talked to him, but some guys are like, hell, man, it's free. I'm going to show up and fish for $100,000 9 times a year. 10 if you make the classic. That's great. That's what we want, and it is. But then there's a million different ways to look at it, Dave. The way I look at it is when you have a rookie coming in, and let's just not even going to name your name. A rookie comes in and has not very many sponsors, and he's like, well, hell yeah. I don't have to pay anything now, but then that rookie goes out there and finishes, in 35th to 50th all year, which in the past would have been a great year. And he would have made $110,000 minimum, now he makes nothing. Literally a couple $100, couple $1,000, if that even, you can finish 40th all year long, make the classic, finish 26th in the classic the following year, make $7,000 with the way the payout is. So, I always tell all my friends, whether it's Caleb or Brad or you or whoever, professional fishing is staying broke long enough to get rich. And I heard that came from Mark Rose a long time ago when he won 2 FLW events back to back. I remember him saying that, like, he'd never had that, he was always a great fisherman, but never won those big tour events, and then he won 2 in a row, like Table Rock, and I don't even know. It was Lake Travis and something else. I don't even remember. But and he said, you got to stay broke long enough to get rich, and in professional fishing, that's kind of true. You've always got to have that top tier that, man, when I win 1 or 2 or 3 events in a year or 2 years, that's going to catapult me to, we're stable financially where you can take care of your family and you gain sponsors. And so this payout right here, that, man, you got new guys coming in that aren't established with sponsors or money. They could be finishing great in that 30th to 50th all year long, and they're not going to make any money. So, where if they put that 45 grand in the first, they'd be making 110 to 100, whatever the cap is. So there's a lot of great things for the guys coming in and a lot of bad things. And, I'm kind of that medium guy where, I've got the trophies, I've got some great sponsors, and I'm comfortable now, but I want to keep that going. I don't want this to turn into, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. That's all I'm going to say. I've got a couple other things I could say, but I don't want to act like I'm biased, because I'm not, because I want the no entry fees. We just got to figure out how to make it a little bit better. Like I said, it doesn't have to be 10 grand to 50th like it has, but man, those guys that are getting 40th to 50th, they can't be taking home a $700 check. I mean, it's pointless for the guy in 40th place to even go back out the third day, with the extra day of housing and gas and running around. So, I mean, there's a lot of things you have to look at that we have to get right on the payout. But I'm definitely in favor of the no entry fee. We just have to make that the bottom end of that payout a little bit better, where guys are going home with $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, just like they would be if they were already paying a $5 grand entry fee and taking home 10 grand. You got to look at it different. It's $5,000 checks now instead of 10 grand at the bottom that we need to get towards. So there's a lot of stuff happening out there right now as we speak right now. There's guys like Hackney that love it, and there's guys that absolutely hate it. People on the top end that finish in the top 4 and 5, I mean, they're going to finish the top 4 or 5 every year, no matter what. So it doesn't matter, because that payout's still good. But in the long run, it just allows you to have a bad year and be comfortable. But in the future, you don't want to have bad years over and over and over and over. You can't base your business model on that, because you're getting, the bottom third of your business cut anyways every year. So you've got to be looking at those guys in the top 50 every year, and or top 65, 70. Top 70 is what's safe. So and that's nothing against, I'm going to have bad years, you're going to have bad years, cruises will have bad years. So that's just life. So there's a lot of ways to look at it, and it's the right step in the right direction for us anglers, for Bassmaster. We've just got to help it grow and figure out some other ways to get some money involved with us, whether it's through Bass, through sponsors, through other companies. I'm not sure on that yet, but we'll figure it out for sure.
Do you think there's a way? First of all, just, you said I'm going to have bad years. I'm trying to avoid that just by not having to catch a damn bass. So let's hope that doesn't happen. But
did we say was going to take your job today when you called me?
Somebody, I guarantee you.
I remember who it was. I'm not going to say the name.
Is there a way to make it? So basically, you're fishing right now for $4.1 million in total throughout the season. Basically, it was double of that last year with the angler's fee, round numbers. Is there a way to make that payback work at 4.1, or does it just simply, by moving numbers around and paying more? I mean, nobody's going to argue the $500 is not what people are used to. That's not what you strive to get to the Elite Series to make. But is there ways to move that money around and make it work, or does it require more funds in total?
I think it requires more funds. You could make it look decent, but you start talking about knocking off the $100,000 deal, and that's the opposite way we need to go.
No, you can't do
that's
that.
That's the opposite way I want to go. So, no, there definitely needs to be some other funds in there. You can shake that around all you want, but with 100 anglers, 102, whatever we're going to be at for 9 events or for 10 events with the Classic, that's a lot of events, so you can't compare us to MLF. They have, I think, 66 guys, 7 events, and then 2 more with heavy hitters and red crest. So I definitely think there needs to be additional funds in there, or additional funds. Let's just say that. There's definitely some other ways for anglers to make money. I just don't know if it's guaranteed or individual, separated or what. So side pot's not the answer to any of this. I'm not saying that we might all not do that one day, because I do like betting on myself, and I am a gambler. So that doesn't need to be part of the equation with us, with Bass or anything, whether that's on the side or not. That's up to us. So I definitely think there needs to be some funds added in there, or some kind of, I'm not sure. I wish I could answer everything right now, but I don't know.
Do you think that in some ways the truth is that anglers have said they don't want entry fees, but like the second it came out, the amount of people that were like, let's put in this and let's put in this, like, do you think there's a part of this sport that we call it a pro sport, and it's a pro sport kind of, but it's kind of pro gambling. And like, I feel like even if after the response to some of this, I feel like there's a certain percentage of anglers, even if you were even if the numbers worked, you were getting $5,000 for 40th place, which is the 10 that you were getting before without the entries. I still feel there'd be anglers to be like, hey guys, I got an extra 45. Let's throw it in. Who wants to play big bucks, no whammies?
Oh, 100%. That's what I said. Now that is, I wish the entry fees were $10,000 and they paid the top 15 only, heavy on the top end. I would roll that any day of the year, because that's what I do. But I would love $10,000 entry fees and them just put all that money in the top 15. And that's what you're fishing for. So you could actually hit big, and, the payouts could be in the upper towards $1 million, it'd be over. So, that would be life changing. Winning $10,000 at the Sabine River is not life changing. So, but that's just me, and that's everybody's. We've got to be, as a group. Us anglers have to be not total agreements. We'll never totally agree on anything, but we've got to be fair with everybody. Not everybody's in the same shoe. Not everybody's wearing the same boot. So, I think we'll always want to gamble, because that's what fishing tournaments have ever been. But I think fishing, to be a professional sport, has to be entry feeless. And this is the right step, the first step in the right direction. And we've got to figure it out. Major League Fishing tried this 3 years ago and it didn't work. So we've got to learn from some of their mistakes, be patient, grow with Bass, grow with our angler group right here. We've got a great core group of anglers. Everybody's trying to get on the same page. As long as nobody gets cold feet and starts running and screaming and fighting with Bass or with us, it's going to work out. We're all going to find a medium ground. I'm hoping, and make this work, because it's definitely the right step in the right direction. I know when we look at the payouts right now, it scares the hell out of us, but I think we can figure some stuff out with Chase and Bass and us anglers.
As long as the goal is to figure stuff out, I think that, just got to get away from the us against them thing, because I think that both groups want it to be successful. And I think that's what you see when you see outrage online. That is passion spilling over where people, but you said that you'd enter $10,000, top 15 take all. So if they took this 4.1 and it was top 15, would that work? Or no, that still doesn't work.
I said
I gotcha.
I would love that. Corey Johnson would love that. Patrick Walters would love that. Chris Johnson would love that. There's definitely, Matt Robertson would be down. There's a lot of guys that, think the whole field should get paid a little bit and everybody be comfortable and go on, and then there's guys that would put it all in there to hit one lick a year and make millions. So that was just an eye.
All right.
Not a hope.
All right.
But I would definitely look at that. Yes. But the group as a whole will not go for that.
No. Well, I appreciate your honesty, and I'm sure it'll get worked out. And I don't know what else to say.
What do you think about it?
I think whatever I say is going to get, People are just going to say you work for Bass in this, but I 100% think that it is the right way to go. I think it is a big move for the sport. I think that the numbers don't work currently. It doesn't really matter what I think, but I understand both sides. I understand. Here's what I find frustrating. I don't think Bass is trying to be evil. I don't think Bass was trying to. I think Bass literally thought this is what they've been asking for.
Put more money into it. They're not being evil. It just hadn't worked. We hadn't got to get the numbers right yet. We're going to figure it out.
And I think it will get figured out because I think both groups want it to be figured out. My biggest strife with all of it is while we're figuring it out in public, we're turning people off of our sport, which isn't good for the anglers, which isn't good for Bass, which isn't good for the industry. I look at it in other terms. I mean, there's no bigger Kansas City Chief fan on earth, but whenever I hear unrest, amongst teams over contracts and stuff like that, a fan of that never. So that's what I worry about, that this constant, and I say negative and it gets overused, but this constant war, whatever happens, get it friggin' settled. Because I just want to yell stuff when you guys catch big fish. And as a fan of the sport, I want to see you guys compete. I don't want to learn that anglers are really good with Excel like I did in the last week. I never knew as many anglers knew how to use Excel as I saw in this past week. Either that or Logan Parks just did it for everybody.
Logan Parks knows how to use Excel.
He does. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but I think it's a good step, like you said. But I think that I feel for anglers when they look at me and they say, hey, I'm going to make 20 grand less, or I'm going to make less here, or I can't afford to fish in this. I mean, that's a tough situation to be in. But I think it'll get fixed. It'll get right.
Yeah, I believe it will. It's just getting started. It's fresh. So, like I already said, I freaked out at first, and we all had to sit back and take a deep breath. And I think everybody's kind of getting on the same page and understanding that it is the right thing that we want to do. We just got to figure out a few more logistics to get it a little bit better, and we'll be good to go.
All right. Well, I look forward to it all working out, and we'll chat soon.
All right. Thank you.
See you, buddy.
Later, bye.
Davey Hite, you are a colleague of mine. Obviously, we get to work together a lot, but another job that you have taken on and recently announced is it angler liaison? I believe what would the term be?
I guess that would be one of the nicest terms I could think of at this point right now, Dave Mercer.
I'm sure this past week it has been many different terms. How busy have you been since the announcement came out?
Oh, I've been busy, but I guess I'd like to just start with, being busy and I love this sport and it has been very good to me and my family. And I know a lot of other anglers that it's been good to and their family. And my story is so much like so many other anglers. We had childhood dreams that people said was foolish, and they were. The more, the more I got involved in actually tournament fishing for a living, the more I realized what a foolish dream it is. And it's still that way. It was that way 30 years ago. It was that way 40 years ago. It was that way 50 years ago. To think that you could make your living fishing. And when I was in middle school, when I was in high school, I had teachers, I had coaches that what they do when you're in school. What are you going to be when you grow up? What's your goals? And I was saying at 12, 13 years old, I want to be a professional bass fisherman. And I got told so many times, you need to have a real dream. You need to, don't even go there. So because this sport has been so good to me, Dave, I feel like at this point in my life, I owe back to the sport. And being an angler for the 23 years and being able to live that dream that I had. Now working with Bass, I don't want to do anything but try to help the sport, help the anglers, help the organization, just be a help. And certainly I'm not perfect. I don't know anyone that is. And mistakes will be made, but I will never do anything intentionally. I can promise you and anyone that's listening, I would never do anything intentional to hurt the anglers or B.A.S.S as an organization or any other tournament organization. I fished FLW, won a lot of money there. And whatever, I would never do that to intentionally to any organization. So yeah, I've been busy, but that's fine. And when you talk to 100 anglers, you there's a lot of different directions that the conversation goes, and that's fine because they all have different needs at certain points of their life. And I just try to be patient and try to be understanding and try to look at the big picture, help the anglers look at the big picture, and that's all I can really do. But I promise you, I feel like I owe back to the sport, and all I can do is try to help it grow. I've got 3 granddaughters and 1 grandson on the way, all less than 3 years old. I'm super proud of my 2 sons. They're very, successful young men. They didn't choose to chase this crazy dream that their dad did, but one of my grandchildren might. So, at this point in my life, that's what I'm thinking about nowadays. So to answer your question in a very long way, I've been on the phone a lot, but that's no big deal. I'm talking to my friends, people that I love, people that I've seen their kids grow up. So it's all good.
The decision to go no entry now, you were involved in a small group that put that together. Why now?
Well, great question. I don't know the answer why now. I guess the biggest thing is the anglers, I can truly say this. The anglers have been asking for no entry fees for as long as I've been around the sport, for 30 years. And there again, about me growing old, there's some elite anglers that you and I know are nowhere near 30 years old. So, I've heard it for 30 years. So that's what the anglers have wanted for 30 years. Why now? I really think, the last meeting that we had, there were multiple anglers that just reached out to, Chase and Phillip were there, along with, other tournament staff and people in the tournament department. And a lot of the anglers said, hey, the economy's tough. Inflation is affecting us all. $45,000 in entry fees. I mean, this was talked about in that meeting. $45,000 entry fees are killing us. And it's the same thing I've been hearing my whole career. It wasn't $45,000 until, I guess 15 years ago, 12 years ago, however long it is. But even 30 years ago, people were complaining. But we just had an election last night that I think the results were because of the economy and the state of the economy, and people are hurting, and we understand that. So I guess to answer your question, I think, the upper management at Bass thought, hey, these guys really are struggling. We heard some stories about people losing sponsors and the economy, gas, food, hotels, all those things. You know that, Dave. All those things have gone up. And, I truly think that they thought, hey, we've heard this, for the number of years that, Chase Anderson has been involved in the sport. We've heard this. We really feel it. Maybe this is the time to try to give them relief. I think it was, they had heard it so many times. They understood that the economy is what it is. And they tried to give them relief. Had no idea that it was going to, be thought as negative as it was. There's some people that thinks it's positive, but it is what it is. The one thing I will promise you, I had no ill will, and there would be no reason for Bass. They didn't make money by telling the anglers to keep $45,000 in their pocket. I mean, they really didn't. Just think about that a little bit. So there was nothing for them to gain there. But it is what it is. And the cool thing is, they're reaching out to them now, to anglers, to try to give them options to restructure, to pay out, or do things. It's not like they have said, this is it. no matter what you guys say, they are reaching out, communicating. I've been talking to people, every single day to see if there's some way to work through this, because everybody wants to, and why not try to make it work? But Dave, there is one thing that's very clear. When you take the anglers 45,000 times 100 anglers, you're looking at round numbers around $5 million. When you take $5 million out of the payout, it's not going to look pretty at first glance. But, maybe redistribution, that sort of thing is a good thing if the anglers want that. I've seen that done in the past. You've seen that done in the past. The anglers a few years back voted to pay all the way down to 75th place. I personally, and I don't have skin in the game now, so this is just Davey's personal opinion. I thought that was a very bad decision to have 100 anglers in the field and pay down that far. But that's what the anglers wanted. So we'll see. I mean, I really don't think, Bass, if they're going to put in, around $4 million, give or take, whatever it is, I don't know the exact numbers, but, hey, I don't think it makes a lot of difference to them, how it's distributed. But it's just not going to be as pretty to shuffle out $4 million as it is with $9 million. But like I said, the cool thing is the money that's not in that pot now, it was the anglers' money. So we'll see.
One of the things that anglers have expressed through this has been expressed in social media is they don't feel they were involved in this. Why do you think B.A.S.? I mean, you said that they're reaching out to them now retroactively, but why do you think that didn't happen before?
So I'll give you what Davey thinks, and that's all I can do is give you Davey thinks. I was asked before the announcement, hey, Davey, what do you think about the no entry fee? And here's what I told him, Dave Mercer. I said, Davey Hite as a competitor would not like this particular decision, because Davey Hite as a competitor, whether I really was or not, I thought I was better than most of the people I was competing against. So I wanted the money in the pot that B.A.S. would put in at the time and the money that the anglers would put in, because it's simply a bigger pot. But I did tell them this. I can't tell you what Davey Hite as an angler would want, and that be the only thing. What I will tell you, because the people that I was talking to have not been around the decisions at B.A.S. and heard the anglers for 30 years like I have. I said, what I will tell you is for 30 years, the number one thing that anglers have asked for is no or much lower entry fees and better payout. And there is no doubt in my mind, and I told them just like that, there is no doubt in my mind that has been the number one ask. And ironically, right after the announcement, and I love Trip Weldon, you do too. Right after the announcement, Trip Weldon texted me and said, wow, this is incredible. It's what the anglers have always wanted. Jerry McKinnis will be so happy looking down on this, because, Jerry wanted that for the anglers because he heard it so many times. So I couldn't help it. I'm old school, and I really want to have a conversation. I couldn't just text back to Trip. I called him and we talked for a little bit, and I said, I've gotten 3 calls, and one is, so happy that this announcement has been made. I said, and the other 2 have been negative. I said, so if that trend continues, it's going to really surprise me. He said, yeah, me too. I said, so Trip, you've been involved in sport for 30 plus years as a tournament director or assistant director. You've been in the tournament department. What was the number one thing you heard for all these years? And he said, no entry fees, lower entry fees. So a day or 2 later, my old buddy Louis Stout, senior writer, he said since 1979, he's been hearing that. So it's not like we haven't heard that. And I was one of those guys for 23 years that were wishing that there was no or lower entry fees and higher payback. I get it. I get it. I get it 100%. But anglers have been saying it for 30 years. They have been saying it for 30 years. So, where did it come from? From the anglers. Did they survey them that, right before they announced it, maybe they wanted to surprise them, thought it would be a good surprise. It's like, buying your kid a bicycle and he wanted a motorcycle. I don't know. It's like, you think they're going to be really happy and they cry, and I'm not saying the anglers were crying. I'm referring to a 5-year-old buying them a bicycle. But I truly think that Bass had good intentions and thought, man, every meeting we hear people saying they want no entry fees. Here they are, and there's some anglers that do think this is awesome, but there's a lot of anglers that don't. And, it is what it is. I understand everyone has their own agenda, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, we all have different lives. We all have different needs. We all have different desires. All of that. I mean, I get everyone has a different agenda, but if we can get to no entry fees and then get the money, build this sport and get money. How do we get Bass to put more money in the pot? I would think to help grow the sport and they would have it. I mean, I don't know that. I'm not their accountant. But I do know in life in general, to be positive and try to make things grow usually works out better than having a negative attitude about things. I've been there and done that. I've had negative attitudes about a lot of things, and just in life in general, just trying to have a positive attitude. Let's work together and see how we can all get to the goal that we all want, and that works out better.
Was it ever tabled to have kind of a gradual decrease in entries? Rather than just going boom, no entries. If they cut them in half,
yeah,
I would assume the anglers would be happy about that too.
So there were a lot of scenarios. Accountants a lot smarter than me, and I didn't run those numbers. I heard the results of this one looks better, but if you look at it, a certain percentage of people would actually be losing money, and this one looks better on the surface, but the number of people and literally the accountants can explain that a whole lot better than Davey. But there again, there's not going to be a pretty way to. I mean, if you're accustomed to 50th place being $10,000, that's pretty hard to do with $4 million. Like you could do with $9 million. And if anglers truly feel like they're all doing better, paying the $5,000 entry fee, have at it. I would never say, no, you don't. Davey knows better. Man, I'm not paying entry fees right now. I mean, so it's not going to matter to me. And I will say this. I know this. I know the anglers don't want to have a bad feeling towards the organization, and I know the organization doesn't have ill will towards the anglers. Could communication get better? Communication can always get better, and I want to help do that. And I owe it back to the sport. I really do. And Bass has communicated to the anglers that they're looking for feedback now on the options to different payouts and how to restructure the payout. So hopefully that's going to all go in a good direction. It's not like they've said, hey, it's this way or the highway. I mean, they are, and it's easy now to say, well, they should offer an option A, B, C, and D, and they've done that with some things. And I personally taught, the paying down to 75th is something that I thought was never good. And now I talk to a lot of anglers that will say, yeah, I know I voted for that, but that's terrible. It's like getting a participation trophy that it's just when you pay a $5,000 entry fee and you get $2,500 back, you're losing $2,500. Yeah, you get to go take a check to the bank and cash it, but that's not going to work out real good if that's you keep doing, spending $5,000 and getting $2,500. And there's, I understand there's costs when you're on the road. When you say no entry fee, there's still costs and expense, but that's going to be there whether the entry fee is 0 or 10,000. That's going to always be there. That's all part of it. The one thing that I think so many people overlook, and maybe not the anglers as much as people just on the outside in looking at the sport, is the platforms that tournament organizations provide gives the angler at in any of those organizations an opportunity to go build your brand and make money from sponsors. And when I decided to leave my full-time job to pursue my dream as a professional angler, I knew that was a must. I knew that at that point in time, you could not make a living without that part of the puzzle. And it's not a whole lot different than that today. There are a few guys, maybe a few more guys that actually could make a living from winnings alone, but it's all part of a big, you need to build relationships and build your brand and work with companies and help sell product. And, all those things are essential to make a good living, whether you have a $5,000 entry fee or zero entry fee. I think that's a key ingredient that oftentimes is not talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. The hard part is when you have an angler that looks at you and says, hey, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be an angler. I explained to somebody else a while ago, and I was like, if you make X amount for your job and to do the same job next year, you're not making that amount anymore. Or it's tough to answer that. Because as you know, as an angler, the last group that we want to finance the change of the sport is the group that has the hardest time making a living in the sport, and that is the anglers.
Yes.
Yes. Do you think that it'll be reorganized? Because I think that's a lot of the $500 for 40th place, that stands out to a lot of anglers. Obviously, yep. In some ways I look at it and I'm like, we would have been better just to pay the top 20. And you know what I mean? Just so we didn't have a $500.
Well, if you did that, then would you cut to Saturday only having 20 guys fishing? That would change the whole dynamic of what we offer to the local host. You just go here, there, the other. I get your point, and that's the easy way to say that. And I've heard a lot of guys say that's not good, or that's a slap in the face. $500. I wish it was 5,000. Who does it?
But it is 5,000. Greg Hackney made that point.
What? It's
$5,500 is his way of looking at it.
Yeah, it is. So you can look at it any way you want to, and you can spend it any way you want to, and that's fine. Like I mentioned to you earlier, I get it. People have different things going on in their lives, but I can tell you what it's not. Is when you pay a $5,000 entry fee and you finish 51st, and they give you $2,500. To me, giving you a check that costs you $2,500 is much more of a slap in the face than I actually have $500 in my hand, not negative $2,500 in my hand. You understand what I'm saying? How can you say $500 in the black is worse than $2,500 in the red? If you can justify that, more power to you. That's fine. I'm not here to argue with anyone. I don't understand some of the logic. What I do understand is more money was always in the payout and less entry fees. Who doesn't want that as an angler? When I go fish when I used to fish a Tuesday nighter, I wanted to pay less and win more. Who doesn't? I don't begrudge anybody of wanting that, but we have to keep our feet on the ground and understand what reality is too.
And when you talk about things getting tougher for anglers, sponsor wise, things are tougher for everybody in the industry. That's sure. Just the pure truth of it. One of the big things that has floated around, no entry fee, whether it be B.A.S. doing it or MLF tried it previous to us, is sustainable. It's not sustainable, as people say. On the B.A.S. end of things, I would assume it's sustainable because the money didn't just appear. That's money that B.A.S. is, it's $200,000 more, but that's money that B.A.S. has been putting in for the last 4 years, 5 years, anywhere from $3.6 to $3.9 million. Is it sustainable on the angler's end?
So I don't know. I talked to Greg briefly several days ago. And he thinks this is great. His memory is very similar to mine. It's what anglers have always wanted. And does it look great? well, when you hear no entry fee, everybody's yes. And then when you look at 30th place being $500, you go, wow. But what Greg is saying, and what I think, and hopefully Bass, this is something that they feel like they can do and it's sustainable. In a year, it might, maybe they can add to the payout and still not have entry fees or whatever they decide. But I feel better, and it's the conservative person that I am. I feel better starting out, walking, and then let's jog, and then hopefully let's all run to the finish line, than to take off running and catch a cramp and don't finish the race. I mean, to offer this to anglers and it be a 2-year deal and say, okay, guys, you've gotten used to no 45,000 this time of year, but we're going to need 45,000 next year. To me, that would hurt.
Yeah.
Rather than saying, okay, we started with this because we think this is sustainable, and then we're going to hope to move forward and get these payouts even higher and higher. Other people think other ways. Obviously, like I said, it's been tried before. I saw some people talking about that. This won't last. Another league tried it a few years ago. So be it. And who knows? But hopefully, this was something that, we can do this, and if it works, then we can keep doing this. But man, if we have a couple breaks and we get a few non-endemics, or we do a little this, a little bit of that, then 30th place won't be $500 very long. That's what I would hope for as an angler, and hope that the organization that I'm working with would be cautiously optimistic and moving into something like this, rather than dive in and not be able to continue it. I mean, because honestly, $4 million to add to a purse is a lot of money.
Yeah.
It'd be better if it was 10. It'd be better if it was 14. I mean, I get it.
Well, I mean, I think the truth about all of it is, as long as we're all trying to make it better, I think that there's this weird, and I said at the beginning of the show, I'm not here to share my opinions, and I'm not. But one thing that does stand out is it's really easy to say that, Bass is doing this because of this or that. And, that, like, I don't think anything underhanded is happening here. Bass is literally trying to make it better. Is that your experience?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I believe that with all my heart. And some people might say, oh, he's not telling the truth, but I can look you in the eye, Dave Mercer, and I call you a good friend. I believe that with all my heart. I don't think they have ill will towards the anglers at all. But we need better communication. That's what they just asked me to help do. That's what I want to do. What I would love is for the anglers to come together with a common voice, and I could communicate with just a person or two. Heck, I call them every day or once a week, and communicate and try to relay their needs and desires to the folks at Bass. That's difficult, though. I've seen through the years, it's very difficult because, when you get 100 men that live not only in different places, but different countries, some of us and some of them, and, there's a lot of different, people are different points of their life, not only their age, but their needs and their, what they have going on with their family. It's tough. What works for one guy doesn't necessarily work for the other guy, and most certainly oftentimes doesn't work for 99 other guys. But I just think we all have this common, and that's what I started talking to you about. I grew up with a childhood dream. Almost everybody involved in this sport has that. Some of the people just work in the industry that might work for a boat company or something. They had that same dream, but they're not an Elite Series pro. But we all have that common dream. We love the sport. We love the competition. And that's what has always bonded us together because, Dave Mercer, I knew the first day I met you, there's a guy that loved the bass fish and he loves the tournament fish. And we've got that in common. And we all do. So I think we should realize that better communication is always a good thing, always a good thing. And getting mad because someone thought you knew this or you didn't know that sure, if that helps you for a day or two, I know I'm that way. That's great. But really, let's stop and think. We're all in this together. We all love this sport. It's not the richest sport in the world. I'd been a lot richer if I'd have been an NFL quarterback than a bass fisherman, I promise you. But I couldn't. Not only could I could not do that physically, that wasn't my childhood dream.
Yeah.
I love to fish. I love to fish. It's not the most lucrative sport in the world, but I love to fish. And we all have that in common. We all have that in common.
Yeah. I think if we all start focusing on that, I mean, this is what we love. You can't change that. And, they are trying to form a group. And I mean, I've said, I think it's good. The Bass Anglers group, whatever it's called, it's good. I mean, the more we're all together,
yes,
the better it is for everybody. The better it is for Bass as a company, the better it is for the anglers, the better it is for everybody.
Well, forming a group to have a common spokesperson or a couple people to speak for a group, I can't speak for the upper management at Bass, but I will say this. I can't see how that would be a negative at all, because instead of people that are trying to, talk companies into sponsoring the organization, trying to, coordinate the 2025 Bassmaster Classic, a lot of things going on. It would be easier to try to talk to a couple of people than to talk to 100 people. I mean, I can't imagine how that would be a bad thing in any way, shape, or form to be able to, the anglers have a common voice with a few people. I would applaud it. I promise you that's what Davey would do.
Well, thanks for spending this time with me. Let's get past this and
I got
get
one
right
question.
back. What?
You said you're not on this podcast to give your opinion, and that's all I've done the whole time is just give my personal opinion. You get in trouble giving your personal opinion because people will disagree with it. Everybody loves you because you just kind of ride that fence and let other people stick their neck out.
No, that is not true. I'm an idiot. I say too many things too often, but I just thought in this situation, I mean, I asked Bass. I directly went to Bass and said, who should I have on the podcast? So I know you're giving your personal opinion, but you're also giving your opinion as somebody who works for Bass. I didn't want this podcast to get played because, and it's going to be anyways, there's going to be a certain amount of people that listen to this conversation that me and you have and say, well, yeah, they're just trying to put lipstick on this and make it okay because they work for Bass. And you can't fight that. I mean, I think the people that know, and the ones that don't, I mean.
Yeah. So Dave, you know this, you know this, and we actually joke about it. We have fun with this. It's absolutely incredible because I was in the military for 14 years. I went from wearing combat boots and camouflage clothing for every day for 10 years that I did it full time. I was full time in the military for 10 years. To shorts and a pair of polarized sunglasses, So I came from a world where you did what you were told. I mean, really, the military is, here's the instructions, here's your daily task, and you go do them to the best of your ability. And the fishing world, you do things on your own. As a pro angler, you're responsible for what you do every day. But now that we work with one another with Bass, it is amazing to me the way they just let us give our opinions. They don't, I've not been told, well, you got to promote this graph or that. That. And I understand there's probably viewers that say, well, that's not true. Well, if you think that, okay, so be it. Like you said, I'm not here to try to convince you. But you and I know it's incredible the way they don't try to force us to say or do things because we need you to say and do this because it makes us look good. Now, they don't let us just be crazy on camera, and act like an idiot, or I try not to. I know I do sometimes unintentional, but they do give us the opportunity to say and do and express what we feel more so than any workplace I've ever been around times 10.
Yeah. It amazes me, like the whole way through. And I get it. It makes a better topic if you're like, well, this is the big machine and the machine is pushing this. They're pushing forward facing sonar. They're pushing. Nobody's pushing nothing. Like literally, me and you have both asked, are we okay to say what? And Mike McKinnis straight up told us, tell us what you feel and what you think about forward facing sonar. The same with everything. So it is just bizarre. I mean, I just think we live in a world where I think things go in cycles. I think, Bass, we were shiny, and a few years ago the split worked out pretty good for Bass because all of a sudden people were like, yeah, that is what I love. I love Bass. Well, now all of a sudden there's a target. And that being said, there's been things that Bass has done over the last number of months that got changed, but I wish they hadn't gone, you know what I mean? So there's reasons where people feel things, but ultimately at the end of the day, Bass, we all are in the same boat. We love this. And even the Andersons, I mean, their initial, and I don't want to even get into this too much because again, people are just going to say you're saying that, but the reason it's their love for the sport, it's frustrating to see how people want to paint it different, but I mean, I'm proud to work for Bass. I'm proud of what Bass does. And I'm proud when I say Bass, I don't just mean the company. I said that at the beginning of this podcast. I mean, the anglers that, it isn't what people think from the outside, but it's pretty cool. And regardless of what somebody thinks of the paybacks, it's pretty cool to have a company trying to make it better for anglers.
Yeah. And trying is all you can do. Yeah. And like I mentioned very early on, no one's perfect. Yeah. But as long as I talk about my sons all the time. They're the, joy of my life watching them grow up. My word to them was, whether they were playing pee-wee ball or college football, they did all of the in between and all of that. As long as you're trying, as long as you're giving 100%, and I'm not a participation trophy kind of guy, but you have to realize all you can do is give it your best. And if I'm around people that give it their best at whatever it is, I'm cool with it. You're my kind of guy. And I had here's something that I could fall back on in fishing when I'd have a terrible tournament or a terrible day. I always worked my tail off. I always focused and was at the boat ramp early and stayed late and did whatever I felt like I could do. And at the end of the day, if I had a bad day on the water, I could always say to myself, it wasn't because you didn't give it your best. It wasn't because you didn't try really hard. And that's life. That's life. We have ups and downs. We have, mountaintops and valleys, highs and lows. But at the end of the day, if you know you gave it your best, or if you know people around you are giving it their best, that's all you can ask. That's all you can ask. And, when we all love to fish, we have that bond. And then if we're all trying to make things better for one another, whether it looks like it or not, I know there's lots of days where it doesn't look like it, then, really and truly, that's all you can ask.
Well, before we started, I made you put your phone on Do Not Disturb. So there's probably a bunch of frustrated anglers trying to call you. So thanks, Davey. I appreciate you taking the time to share your opinion and Bass's opinion of everything that's going on.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
Let's get back to just doing the running man in jorts. That's the bass fishing I love.
That's right. That's right.
There you have it. 3 different individuals, 3 different viewpoints on the big change at Bass. I think the thing that stands out to me is the goal is always the same amongst everybody, no matter what they think, is to make it bigger, to make it better, to make it more sustainable. And as long as we're all working towards that, things are pretty good. We've heard their opinions. Now this is your opportunity to share your opinion in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff. Don't forget AFTCO Breakwater. Put that in your comments and you might get yourself a new set of gloves. Speaking of dreams, one of the original dreamers, the mighty Mr. Bob Cobb. Take it away.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, because Bob Cobb of the Bassmasters told you to. You hear?